Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your patience. We shall now move on to the next session, which is track 1. Ladies and gentlemen, in this session titled AI Use in Offensive Influence Operations, What Are We Dealing With?, has proven to be incredibly powerful tool that is accelerating advancements across industries, from automating repetitive tasks to enhancing decision making. However, like any tool, it can be misused, and its potential for harm becomes especially apparent in areas such as hostile influence campaigns. In these campaigns, AI has been leveraged to manipulate public opinion, spread misinformation, and even destabilize governments. The impact of AI in these contexts is profound, shaping not only how information is disseminated, but also how trust is eroded. This exploration will delve into the multifaceted ways AI is influencing these campaigns and far-reaching consequences of its misuse. Let us dive into the finer details with our speaker. But before I invite him to stage, I'd like to introduce a little bit of his profile. Our speaker today, Mr. Florian Frank, was present in the previous plenary session. He is the director of Cyfluence Research Center and has been working on cyber intelligence field for more than a decade. Without further ado, Mr. Florian, the stage is yours.
Hello. Yeah, back again. Good to see you all again. Okay. Yes, so the topic today is the use of AI in hostile influence campaigns. Now, I'll kind of walk you through how they're used, how AI is used. As just in the introduction, I mean, AI is a tool, can use be for good and bad, and we're going to look at the dark side. A few words to us. We're the Cyfluence Research Center. We study digital hostile influence in all its aspects. We're a nonprofit based in Berlin. And we work with universities, scientists, think tanks, NGOs, governments, pretty much across the world. And although we're based in Berlin, we have a very heavy emphasis on Southeast Asia. For us, we do a lot of work in tracking, especially Chinese campaigns, not only. And we really see in our field, one of the big issues is that the major, let's say, scientific work is very Eurocentric, and in some degree also US. If anyone is here from universities in Malaysia, I'd be very, very happy to connect. We have very interesting projects that we're working right now with universities in Europe, Australia, etc. And we're building a network across the globe. One of our guiding principles is to kind of bridge the gap between academia and what I like to call the real world. From our side, we have very, very practical experience. All of us in our team come from intelligence background, security background. Some of us were in services. I myself was in the private sector in this field. And I'd like to say we were in the trenches. We really know what it is to actually lead defense teams, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the things we noticed is that while we have a lot of practical knowledge, there are very few frameworks, and there's very few actually research being done across the globe in this field. And on the other hand, when I work with a lot in academia, very often we face the issue that, you know, in academia, everything's very theoretical, and they come up with these concepts, and once they actually hit the real world, they collapse. And so one of the things that we try to do is actually bridge that and bring in our practical knowledge, but actually work with universities, et cetera, to see how we can help them and also how they can help us to take our knowledge and actually create these frameworks that are necessary. This is our webpage. All of our research is for free. You don't even have to sign up. Just go there, download it, have a look at it. We have a very cool blog, and also we have, I have to say this, I think the only newsletter currently on information warfare where you have a weekly overview of what's going on in the media. So if you really want to be on the top of the field, read it and you'll know exactly what's going on. Pretty cool. So we're talking about hostile influence campaigns. So to begin with, let's see, hostile influence. Hostile influence refers to internal but also external actors that are trying to manipulate political processes, institutions, populations, subsets of populations, etc., but in a hostile manner. So I don't really care if someone is trying to influence people to drink less. We really only look at the dark side of things. So that's why the hostile is always very important. Also sounds very cool. And then we go into hostile campaigns. So when we talk about a campaign, that means there's a threat actor. There's planning, there's resources, there's coordination. So this means we're talking about time, content, narratives, etc. Malicious intention, like I said, we don't care about an anti-smoking campaign. And inauthenticity, so we're talking about fake accounts, fake websites, etc. So why is this important? Actually, each one of these points for us as defenders, when we are trying to find these campaigns, are points where we can actually start investigating. So I mentioned before in the panel discussion when we're talking about identifying bots and fake accounts, these are indications for us that there is a threat actor. But that's not enough. When we talk about correlation, time, so in these kind of campaigns, you'll have something around an event, an election, or something similar. So this is something that we have fake accounts, we have time, etc., etc. And this is where all the different puzzle pieces that come together, and for our analysts, this is how we start investigating. This is actually looks very confusing, but before I get into the use of AI, let's have a look at the components of a hostile influence campaign. So we hear about, disinformation campaigns, we hear about all these different kinds of terminology, but what does it actually mean? And this is where we look at it from the perspective of an attacker. So if I'm a threat actor, I'm going to run a campaign, I need to make a decision and actually build infrastructure. So this infrastructure, it can be social media. This is actually predominantly where we see most of these campaigns running. We have messaging services. I can tell you, for example, in Germany, we have a lot of Russian campaigns. They're running over Telegram, but not only WhatsApp, etc. We have the darknet. This is where we go into cyber attacks for influence. I was actually yesterday holding a talk specifically on this topic, the use of cyber attacks in these kind of influence operations. And then we have the ClearNet. When we talk about the ClearNet, this is, the websites, etc., that you can reach via, Google, etc. And fake websites, and I'll talk a little bit about that, are really a cornerstone in many of these campaigns. So when we have an attacker, he needs to decide how to build his infrastructure. And that really depends on the target audience that you want to attack. So, for example, if I am running a campaign and I want to influence the under 25-year-olds, I'm probably not going to use Facebook. Because let's be honest, anyone under 30 or 35 probably doesn't have a Facebook account anymore. When I'm looking at running a campaign in Thailand, Line all of a sudden becomes really, really important. Malaysia, not so much. So these are the kind of, for us as defenders, where we need to start considering, what the attacker could be using, vice versa. If I'm the attacker, I need to build together my campaign. One thing that I do want to mention is the difference between when we talk about hostile influence campaign and what is referred to as disinformation. So I can tell you in many cases, people use this interchangeably. And a good example of that is really quite a lot of elements of the German government. The German government, I had a conversation 2 months ago with someone, and that person mentioned to me that, oh yes, everything is disinformation. Now, this is actually a huge issue, in my opinion, because actually factually it's incorrect. When we talk about hostile influence campaigns, again, like I mentioned before, we have different elements. We have the threat actor, we have the infrastructure that's being built. When we talk about disinformation, it simply means the spread of incorrect information with intent. But it doesn't say anything about, how I'm spreading it, who's spreading it, etc. And vice versa, we see a lot of hostile influence campaigns that actually don't use disinformation. I'll give you a good example. We're looking at Chinese and Russian campaigns running in sub-Saharan Africa, and very often they use colonial narratives, what the Europeans in the West, the crimes and atrocities, etc., they committed during the colonial era. This is not disinformation. We as Europeans, we colonized Africa, we did terrible things, and a lot of the consequences we're still seeing today. But when we talk about hostile influence, it could be that I'm, for example, flooding the space with specific targeted true information, and therefore also manipulating a population. So again, when we talk about disinformation campaigns, I don't like the terminology because actually many don't use disinformation. Most do, but many don't. So I wasn't sure if this was going to be an interactive thing today, so I said this as a question. How do you think AI could be used? I guess today it's more as of a lecture, so yes, AI plays a predominant role. And really what we see is it's the same thing as any business. And nowadays when we talk about these kind of threat actors that are running the campaigns, a lot of them are actually being committed and done by private sector entities. So it used to be governments that do this, but let's be honest, if, for example, a government ministry decides to run a campaign against another country, on TikTok, I'm pretty sure that the government stooge who's 55 years old is probably the least qualified person to run a viral TikTok campaign. So what actually happens, private sector companies are being hired by governments and increasingly also by different interest groups, corporations, et cetera, et cetera. And just like any business, it's a question of time and cost. And so we were talking a lot today about AI, the use of AI, and a lot of the benefits. That means I can automate things, I can cut down on workforce, et cetera, et cetera. And we see the exact same thing like, in these kind of campaigns. And it's really quite mundane. So I will give you an example further on, which kind of gives an outlook to the future, which I think is very frightening, but the sad truth is I'd like to come with amazing stuff, but it's not. We talk about content creation, and I'll give you a few examples of how that is actually a lot easier nowadays. Infrastructure, so we mentioned before, we looked at this very confusing slide, and localization. I won't go so much into localization, but this pretty much means when we talk about AI nowadays, the ease with which we can use it to copy speech patterns, even down to specific age groups, ethnic groups, translation work into different languages, et cetera, which is only a mouse click nowadays and used to be very complicated. And when I say used to be, I'm really talking about 5 to 10 years ago. So content creation. This is something that I made, and poor Mr. Macron is going to be a couple of times today. Nothing against the gentleman. But when we look at an influence operation, so an offensive influence operation, and let's make an example out of this. I'm running a fake news website, I'm running multiple accounts, and I'm pushing out content. Going back, let's say even 8 years ago, I actually had to have a graphic designer on my team who had to create everything. That's one person I had to hire, pay for, and wait for him to do stuff. That's off the table. This took me 5 seconds. Macron screaming. And after that, I just put something down. And I think all of us here have, in one way or another, come across political memes that we may think are associated to a campaign. So I'm going to raise a finger. Who's come across this in his social media feed? One way or another. Some kind of like memes, political memes, all this kind of stuff. 2 people. Wow, okay. I hope it's more because, and you're just shy. But this just kind of goes to show, like what used to actually take, half a day or even more, now takes 3 seconds. When we look at spreading these kind of, the content. So one of the ways that we as defenders used to be able to easily find campaigns is when we looked at multiple accounts and we run this through multiple systems, and then we are able to see, okay, these 100 accounts or 1,000 or 10,000 accounts shot out a single sentence within a specific time frame. Very easy to track, very easy for us to put together a network. Well, nowadays, I can just go to an AI and say, look, this is the content. I want this cut down to 2 sentences or 3 sentences. Give me 200 different variations. And this already becomes, for us tracking it, a lot more difficult to actually, because before it was easy. Now we have a huge variation. And again, it's only 1 mouse click away. It's typing something in, pressing enter and seeing, and then spreading it across my network. By the way, not the topic today, but on the defense side, we also are using AI. And the current generation of software that we're using is actually very adept at identifying narratives. So it's always a cat and mouse game. For a while, we were kind of like a little bit behind as defenders. And really, when it came to these like different kinds of sentences, was very difficult for us to see. Now, with the new systems, we're actually able to find them again, and we're very curious to see how they're going to, pardon my language, screw us over again in the near future. So it's kind of a cat and mouse game. This, by the way, this is actually a real campaign that we're tracking. It's a Chinese campaign running against Japan around the whole Fukushima issue. Fascinating to watch. 10 minutes, I got it. This is where we go into the area of deepfakes. Now, again, we have Mr. Macron. He actually posted these himself. And these are some examples which I find actually quite amusing. But then again, just think about the impact it has on you as a leader. And Macron currently is not in a good state. He is under severe attack by Russian campaigns. It's pretty much, if you've seen in the newspaper, it's all over the media. And it is having, it has a detrimental effect on people. Then again, I did have to chuckle when I saw this. When it becomes really sinister, when we talk about deepfakes, is when they're used inside these campaigns. And these are 3 examples. We have, this is during the last election, Elizabeth Warren, maybe you've heard of her from out of the US. Apparently she said in a video, you could see it, that we need to prevent Republicans from voting. It was a deep fake, but it was spread across multiple networks. Drunk Nancy Pelosi, this is the current president of the Philippines, who is apparently snorting cocaine in this, also a deep fake. And something from us in Europe, this is an audio deepfake, was a very genius operation that was run, we think, by the Russians shortly before the election. It was an audio, and it was indistinguishable. Like until today, actually, just from the background noise, we kind of assume it was an audio fake. Him saying that they're going to use gypsies to manipulate the election, and arguably that actually cost him the election, and currently we have a pro-Russian government in Slovakia. So actually this kind of use, if deepfakes are used properly, can have detrimental effects in the political landscape. And really the challenging thing for us in when we look at it from the defense side is identifying them. I'll give you an example with deepfakes. I was reading an article this week. Video deepfakes are so good now that medical software can actually identify the heartbeat. And some people in the identification of audio, video deepfakes were using this kind of medical software. It no longer works. And what I just read this morning is now that the videos are so good that you can actually see with the heartbeat the blood moving through the vessels. So this is the level of, let's say, authenticity that these deepfakes have now. This is hugely challenging to deal with that. Infrastructure. Again, I was mentioning this before, we have all these different kinds of elements when we are building as an attacker campaign, as a defender trying to find them. Fake websites. We ran an experiment 2 years ago. We built a fake news website. Our experiment was we wanted to see how many people it would take to run a daily, updated, interesting, engaging news website. We were 2 people. We were able to actually finish it in a day. We took content from New York Times, Guardian, etc., threw it into ChatGPT, said, you know, rewrite it and shorten it by 1/3, put it on there. I would say it was a very, very interesting news webpage. Very interesting. If you look at these operations 8 years ago, it was a team of 10 people, journalists, etc., that were necessary to run this. Now, 2 years later, where you can actually automate a lot of that using AI, I would argue it's not 2 people, 1 web page, it's 1 person, 20 web pages. So again, we see time costs going down. And what I mentioned before, we have this element of the democratization of crime. So it's becoming very easy. You don't need the skill sets anymore to actually do all of this stuff. You can just use AI. And this is my last slide, so don't worry. This is kind of, this is an example of a report from Anthropic. They run Claude. And they caught a campaign that was operating multi-client influence networks, etc., across many platforms. So what actually happened, and there is an argument right now, is as to how effective it is and how long they can work before they break down, because AI, last year we saw a lot of automation of entire campaigns, and then we saw a lot of the attackers take that back because it didn't work well. But it's only a question of time. And so what we're seeing is that where before, when you have your so-called fake accounts, etc., especially when we talk about deep avatars, like really sophisticated ones, you needed operators running them. 1 operator running anything from 5 to 10, realistically. And this is now increasingly being automated, where you can actually give the accounts a personality, define how they should react, to what they should react, what they should write, what they should share, etc., etc. Fully automated accounts. And here we go actually into the implementation of different kinds of LLMs. So first of all, ones that are running the accounts, management LLMs that are going to actually be used to manage these different accounts, and then another layer of AI that actually does the quality control out of all of it. And I'm actually currently dealing with a researcher who in a laboratory built all of this, and he's running it. So it is a question of time. This is actually a case that was shut down because they were able to identify it and shut it down from their side. But dare I say, this is actually what we're going to deal with. I'm not even going to say 2 or 3 years down the line. This year it's already happening. It's not very effective yet, as we think, but I would say beginning next year, this is the reality that we're going to deal with. Thank you.